Morning. This particularly dreary day is in stark contrast to the reality that we celebrate on this liturgical Sunday. In the midst of our Advent season, we wear purple, and then we wear pink, or rose, and then purple again. The reason being is there's that break in the midst of what we're doing in Advent to remember that what we're doing in Advent is only make-believe. What we're doing is pretending like Jesus hasn't already come yet, and that we're waiting for him to come at Christmas Day. But the reality is, y'all, for us Christians, for the whole world, but we recognize it, Christ has already come. God is already Emmanuel. He's already among us. He's already with us. And so because that Christian spirit of joy, of exultation, of ecstatic rejoicing in the reality that Jesus has come, he's accomplished his work, he's won his victory, he's shared it with us, and we're now offered an invitation, we're invited to share with him. We can't keep that down for too terribly long. So we get 2 weeks into Advent, and then we're like, okay, we need a break. We got to rejoice a little bit. And then we'll be back to Advent, pretending like Jesus hasn't gotten here yet, so that we can celebrate Christmas. And that's what this is really all about. The Advent season is about pretending that something hasn't happened yet, so that we can reappreciate the reality that we live in and have lived in every day of our lives. Because it's been 2023 years that our Lord has reigned as King of the universe, right? We don't appreciate what it was like beforehand. We have always lived in a Christian era, whether the culture or the governments or the kingdoms or the empires have appreciated that fact. It doesn't matter. Christ has reigned, right? And this is kind of like what we do during Lent. If you recall, there's that one day during Lent also where we wear rose. Does anybody know the name of that day in Lent, by the way? Starts with an L. Laetare Sunday. It's a day similar. It's almost the same thing. We should really just call it the same word. But Laetare Sunday is a rejoicing Sunday where, as Christians penitent during Lent, giving up things as an atonement for our sins, spending time reflecting on our conscience, cleansing and purifying all of the evil things in our lives, just as we cleanse our houses on Mardi Gras of all of the leaven, the breads and the meats of our home going into the Lenten fasting season, so we do with our conscience. Christians can't stay sad for very long. And so in the midst of the Lenten sad season, we have that day of rejoicing. Like, okay, all right, we've been sad enough. Let's be honest. Jesus is alive. I know we're pretending like he's not. We're pretending like he's going to go into his passion and his death. And we're pretending like he's going to be in his tomb so that we can get ready to celebrate his resurrection. But come on, y'all, let's be honest. Jesus is alive, right? And that's what that day is really trying to tell us in the Lenten season. We're just pretending. Right? And that's what we're doing in Advent. We're just pretending like Jesus hasn't already been born of the Virgin Mary, taking on our flesh and being born into the world. We're pretending like we're a people sitting in darkness who haven't yet seen the great light, anticipating the dawn of Jesus. But today, we have to sit back and we just have to admit, yeah, we're just pretending. God is here. We're not a people sitting in darkness. If we're sitting in darkness, that's our own choice. We've got our eyes closed. Because Christ has come, and he has brought the light. And so we're trying to get ourselves into a condition where we can appreciate what God did for us in sending his Son so that we can celebrate Christmas better. And what is that? Well, we get that in the readings, right? John the Baptist is stuck in prison. Okay? And he not only is a Jew before Christ comes, well, before the Messiah accomplishes his task, so he's a people sitting in darkness, but he's also in prison. And this isn't like a nice jail or a nice prison. This is a basement hole under some magistrate's house that's dark and humid and hot and stuffy and has probably more people in it than should be there. And there's no running water. I'll leave that to your imagination, right? So John's stuck in this hole, and his disciples come to him and say, we have reason to hope. They come to John and they say, John says, I've heard rumor of this Jesus. Go find Jesus and ask him if he's the Messiah. And so the disciples run off and they go find Jesus and they say, John has sent us to ask you a question. Are you the Messiah, or are we still supposed to wait for another? And imagine the anxiety of waiting when you know that it's just about to happen. We've all had that experience, right? When we know something's about to happen and it can't happen just yet. And so we're waiting and we're waiting. And we can't control it when it happens, but we know it's going to be soon. Like, how many of you guys have waited? Do you remember as a kid anticipating like your favorite family members showing up for a holiday season or something like that? Or your friends are coming over and you know they're coming today, but they're not quite here yet. And you're wondering, when are they going to show up? And then when they do, you're really excited. Well, John is straining in his conscience, his soul, for the Messiah, and he thinks that Jesus might be it. So he sends his disciples. They ask him. And Jesus says, go back and tell John this. The blind can see, the lame can walk, the leper is healed, the deaf can hear, people are being raised from the dead, and the poor are having good news proclaimed to them. That's what Jesus says. Does that sound vaguely familiar? Like what was said in the first reading in the prophet Isaiah, when the steppe will rejoice and the deserted land, the desert, will bear fruit. What he's saying is that the world will be rejuvenated by the coming of this Messiah, and it will be marked by these things. The deaf will hear, the blind will see, the lame will walk, the leper will be cleansed, the good news will be proclaimed to the poor. Jesus is giving his CV to these disciples so that they can go back to John and say to John, he didn't say yes, but he's doing all the stuff. And in the midst of John's imprisonment, John gets that news and he rejoices. The man is suffering horribly. And his sufferings are as nothing to the good news that he's just heard. He doesn't care about anything else anymore. Right? So there's two images I kind of want to give you to bring this sort of to ourselves to appreciate this. How many of y'all have ever been spelunking or caving? Okay, not too many. That's probably a good thing that we don't find ourselves in holes often, right? But I think everybody can at least imagine this, right? You go into a cave, and maybe it gets narrow, and you get on your belly, and you're crawling around corners and through crevices, and maybe a cavern opens up, and it's huge and amazing, and it's got all these stalactites and stalagmites and glowing things that reflect the light. They don't glow, but they reflect the light, and it's beautiful. And you're like a half a mile underground and back in this cave, and then all of a sudden your light goes out. And so you get your backup flashlight because you're responsible, and you go to turn it on and it doesn't work. And your buddy that you took with you, because you don't do these things by yourselves, his isn't working either. And now you're in a cavern underground in the absolute dark. I want to explain something to you. If you've never experienced this before, closing your eyes, even in a dark bathroom or something, does not compare to the darkness of being in a cave underground. It is as if the world has winked out. Your eyes, it's as if you don't have eyes. It's not like you can't see what's in front of you. It's like you don't have eyes. It's so dark. And if you're quiet, if you can convince the other person next to you to quit panicking, right? Chill out. This is one of the beautiful parts of it. Being in a cave is nice because nobody can bother you, right? But if you're quiet enough, because all of your senses are so deprived of what they crave, you can hear the blood moving through your body. It's insane. And then that becomes loud and you're like, I wish that would be quiet too, but then you don't wish that would be quiet because then you'd be dead, right? This is kind of the condition that humanity finds itself in, waiting and longing for the Messiah. Just completely deprived, utterly deprived of what it longs for. And God, y'all, let me tell you something. If you're in that situation, there is nothing you can do to get yourself out of that situation. You can't see where the entrance is to that cavern that you got into. And even if you could find that one, you wouldn't know if that was the right one. And if you got into it and it happened to be the right one, there are 12 or 13 other windy twists and turns and lefts and rights that you had to choose along the way that you're not going to be able to find. There's nothing you can do to get out, except that we were smart and told the ranger before we went into the cave where we were going, the route we were taking, and how long we expected to be there. So 4 hours after we don't come out of the cave and we're supposed to have, what does he do? He sends someone with a light to come and find us. So the ranger dispatches his deputy, and the deputy's got his light and 12 other lights, and he's got the LED headset, and he's got all the glow-in-the-dark vest, and he's coming. And us, sitting in darkness in that underground cavern, all of a sudden start to see on like the wall over there, it's lightening up. There's a little bit of light over there. What is that? And then it's getting brighter and brighter as he's coming around the twisties and the turns, and the light is bouncing vaguely off some of the walls. We can see something, and then he's getting closer, and it's clearly a light, and somebody is coming. Someone's on their way to save us. Now, in the midst of all of the other emotions, and perhaps the wet pants that you're now wearing, right? Could you at least give me that you would feel joy at the advent of that light? That someone was coming who could save us. This is where John the Baptist is in this moment, in this prison, waiting with all of humanity for the coming of the Messiah, and now all of a sudden, this light is starting to show up. Blind people are seeing. Deaf people are hearing. Good news is starting to be proclaimed to the poor. The lepers are starting to be cleansed. There's light on the cavern walls. Could this be the one who's coming to save us? Right? And that's what John said. That's what John sends his disciples to ask Jesus. Are you the one who is going to save us and get us out of this cave and back into the real world where everything is bright and everything is joyful and everything is the way that it's supposed to be? Jesus he essentially says yes, and sends his disciples back and confirms for John. And so it puts into perspective for John what's affecting him in the moment as nothing at all. What do I care about the problems of the world I find myself in right now? Because the Messiah is here and everything's going to be okay. And that's essentially the thing that this rose candle symbolizes for us in the midst of this Advent season, that we're not really fooling ourselves into thinking that things are not okay, but that we realize that the Christ is already Emmanuel, He's already with us, and that everything then is going to be okay. That all of life's difficulties that we're experiencing, the sorrows of loss, the struggles of interpersonal relationships, the injustices of sins and crimes done against us, the struggle of and burdensomeness of addiction or of mental illness, the loss of job and the struggling of economic prosperity in our families, perhaps the lack of food or the lack of clothing, whatever the difficulties are, in the light of the fact that the Messiah is here and Christ is with us and we are invited to heaven, it really is going to be okay. And so this is kind of the other kind of reality. It's going to put it into perhaps a more, it's completely unrealistic, but a more practical example for you. If I were to tell you that right now, if you'd like, I could make you like Superman. All of your bad back and arthritis and all of your rheumatoid stuff and all of the old age stuff, I could fix it right now. Any sort of physical problem that you have, I can heal it. I can get you right back to the best you've ever been, to your fighting weight, to your fighting fitness. By the way, I can make you strong as Superman, faster than a speeding bullet, jumping over, what does he do? He's leaping buildings in a single bound. And I will also give you the laser beams out of your eyes. If I told you I was going to do all that for you right now, and I gave it to you, and you experienced that, how big would any of the problems in your life right now seem? They're real problems, but how big would they seem? How problematic would they seem? Would you think to yourself at that point, you know what, I can deal with this stuff? I think you'd agree that yes, I can. Well, I have better news than that. And it's not something that I can do for you, but it's something that God has already done for you. By virtue of your baptism, you have been made not some Superman, but you have been made like God. This is what Jesus is talking about when he says that of all people born of woman, there's no one greater than John the Baptist. And yet, the least in the kingdom of heaven are greater than him. So, if he's the greatest born of woman, and there are yet more who are greater than him, what are those people? How do you get greater than the greatest born of woman? You're born in some other way. Remember, Jesus says to Nicodemus, who comes to him at night, unless you are born of water and the Spirit, you have no life within you. How can a man be reborn after he is already born? Does he return to his mother's womb? And Jesus says again, no, unless you're born of water and the Spirit. By being baptized, and this is exclusive of to those who are baptized, by being baptized, you are made greater than the greatest born of woman because you are born of Spirit. You are born of God's own life. The natural greatness that you have the potential to achieve is far surpassed by the gift given to you in being recreated in baptism to share in the divine nature of God. And this is why Jesus came. He came to take flesh so that our flesh could share his divinity, to make you divine, to divinize you. Would you rather be Superman or God? Answer the question. Who said Superman? You'd rather be Superman than God? Buddy, you're going to die someday. Even Superman dies. You see what happened to him when he fought Doomsday? He got all crushed up. That's bad. He died. If you're not God, you die. That's essentially the long and the short of it. I understand your point. You haven't seen God in action the way that you've seen Superman in action. But let me tell you something. For us to simply be Superman is pathetic compared to being divine. That by which all things are created. That which made, if Superman were real, that which made Superman. Superman is subordinate to God, if Superman exists. Angels, subordinate to God. Powers and principalities, dominions, thrones, all subordinate to God. And God invites you to share in that nature, to rise above the dignity of Superman, to rise above the dignity of John the Baptist, to rise above the dignity of the angels and the angelic powers, to rise above the dignity of all save himself, because you are made like him. If that's true, and you have to deal with some stuff for a little while in the meantime, before you get to heaven, what are your problems right now really worth? Do they really deserve to control your life? If Jesus is with us, if he's made you like him, yeah, maybe you got a couple more days to live. Maybe you got a couple more years to live. Maybe you got a couple more decades to live in the midst of the difficulty. But if the reality that I've just described is real for you now and will be real for you forever in heaven, can you deal with it? Can you keep it in perspective? Can you recognize that all things come from God and are returning to God? And can you recognize that we no longer sit in darkness? Because God has sent the light to illuminate not only our world, but our very souls. We are a people for whom that is true, and we have accepted that truth and been made like God. We cannot spend more than a few days at a time pretending like God isn't here. We need this day, Gaudete Sunday, to bob back to the surface of reality and to let our joy at God's gift to us in His Son shine brightly, to rejoice. And as the prophet Isaiah said, to not be afraid. I'll leave you with his words once again. Strengthen the hands that are feeble and make firm the knees that are weak, because to those whose hearts are frightened, be strong and fear not. Here is your God. He comes with vindication, with divine recompense. He comes to save you. This is Isaiah talking. For you and me, it reads this way. Be strong and fear not. Your God is here. He has come with vindication and with divine recompense. He has saved you.